Hello and welcome to the PFFUI podcast. On this month's episode, President Tony Murray, Vice President Hank Harris, and Political Director Cody Leever provide a recap of the 2026 session of the Indiana General Assembly. They discuss priority bills and provide a full report from the 2026 session. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the PFFUI podcast. My name is Eric Shoib, and I'm joined today, as always, by President Tony Murray. Hello, Tony.
Eric, how you doing?
I'm great. Yourself?
I'm doing really well. Happy spring.
Happy spring. The 2026 session of the Indiana General Assembly started in December and ended in March. It was a short session this year, but longer with the early start. Tony, why don't you kick off our session recap?
All right. Well, I think it's important to mention, and we have our legislative affairs team here for the PFFUI, Hank Harris and Cody Leever. And I think it's important to say, too, that, during the legislative process and what we do with our legislative advocacy, we're looking out for issues that affect firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, and 911 telecommunicators or 911 dispatchers. And in the course of any legislative session, there's any number of bills that come up, some of them that we work on to get started even before the session begins. And we're going to review those as our priority bills. But I think it's important for our listeners to know that, policy that's made at the Indiana State House that affects our members, that's the first and foremost paramount mission of the PFFUI, any state association actually in the IFF. So all the state associations have a presence in their capital, and Indiana is no different from that. And some state associations, state unions hire outside lobbyists to do that advocacy. But here in Indiana, we choose to do our own. We've had a very successful run as things go over the course of the years, doing this work. So that's it's important for our members to know that's part of what we're doing in any given course of the year. And as you mentioned, this was a short session, meaning that it was not a long session, but it actually was a short session that was pretty long.
But it felt very long, didn't it?
It felt long. So yeah, we're in the halls of the State House and monitoring legislation, but advocating for issues that are important for our members throughout the session. So our team this session changed a little bit, and this was Hank's second session, Cody's first session, and why don't we just throw it to Cody here for his impressions of what the 2026 legislative session was about.
Thank you, sir. As you said, Eric, we actually got started in December with this short session with the special 2 weeks called for redistricting. But they actually took on some more business than just redistricting. They held some committee hearings, even had one of our priority bills heard during that time, which really shortened things up. This already short session, which typically runs through mid-March-ish or end of March, they actually shortened it up to the end of February. So everything was really condensed. They did about 3 months worth of work in really about 6 weeks once we got started with the actual session in January. So it was very condensed. And from talking to you guys and our other friends in the halls and legislators, it seemed like, it was a short session, but everybody kind of felt like it was a really long, short session. Early mornings, late nights. And this being my first session there full time, it was really eye-opening. And I kind of had a little bit of an idea of the respect that we had from those legislators and the other lobbyists, just from being around a little bit. But this being there every day was really, really eye-opening. And it's because of the work that we do and that we've been doing for decades. And President Murray, you mentioned it. We don't hire out. We do our own lobbying, and we are there every single day, testifying on bills and committees, building those relationships. And even though there's 3 of us, sometimes we're running all over that place, trying to hit different committees, trying to get different votes, trying to track bills, talking to different legislators, and they're trying to find us as well. One thing that I have come to really realize is they lean on those people out in that hallway, us especially, because like we said, we are the subject matter experts when it comes to firefighting and our pensions and our benefits. They lean on us. So if they see something come across their desk, they want to know how we feel about it, and that means a lot. And just know that we're there every single day, and I think it really has an impact.
I would agree. The other thing too with technology, um, we're able to broadcast more and really inform our members, whether that is through social media or the weekly after action reports that we put out. For those that are interested in following that, it's important that we're able to do that. We also use technology as well in terms of monitoring some committee meetings. Everything is broadcast and everything is live streamed. So we're able to oftentimes literally be at two places at once when we're plugged in and monitoring some other legislation through the live video feeds as well, that we could be one part of the building, but also listening in the other ear on some of that live broadcasting. But you're right, Cody. I think that, over time, the legislators can't be experts at everything, and that's really, those people that are in the hallways, including us, bring a particular level of expertise on whatever the subject matter is, and legislators really rely on that to help educate them, and we hear them talk about that it's a value to have that expertise to clarify particular issues. A lot of the things that we talk about in fire and EMS are pretty technical in nature. So when they're considering policy or policy changes, or how these services are funded, we bring that particular insight that I think is helpful in helping them make decisions. So we appreciate your commitment to this, certainly, Hank. But I would also mention too, and I think I talked about this a little bit at the legislative conference, that we're in the background. We're able to engage our communications team to push out information, but also our legal team. So our general counsel may be looking at bills, but also our data ops team is doing some real-time analysis of some of the fiscal impacts and how particular bills might affect revenues and streams like that. So we're kind of pretty broad in the nature of how we do this. It's yes, testifying on bills are important, but also crafting and getting the data and information that helps us to provide testimony is important too.
So we're just going to dive into the bills now. So Hank, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Eric. So just kind of a quick overview. While, as Cody said, it was a very short session, it was even more condensed. It was not short as far as bill filings. They still had approximately 800 bills that were filed during the session, of which we were tracking right around 100 of them, including all types of topics. By the end of the session, we kind of was paring that down to about 30 focus bills that we were really focusing on. And it goes down for a number of reasons. They don't get a hearing in committee, or it's not going anywhere, or we hear stuff like that. So we can kind of parse that 100 track bills down to 30. So out of those 30, we'll go through a couple of them. We'll start with our priority bills here. So first priority bill we had was House Bill 1044. This is insurance coverage for public safety employees. It was authored by Representative Pressel, and it was signed by the governor on February 26th of this year. What this bill does is it offers insurance for those members that receive a Class 1 or Class 2 disability benefit if they're eligible for health care benefit from their employer, and it specifies that the member shall not pay any more than an current active member would be paying. Another point in here, it's very important for members who wish to do this, is it goes back to January 1 of 2020. But you must file in writing that you are requesting to receive this benefit before June 1st of this year. So while it's been signed, the clock's ticking, so we need to make sure you get your written request in by June 1st.
And we're working on creating kind of a template for that we're going to send out to locals, right, that they can share with members that are affected by this.
Yeah. I'll kick it over to Cody, kind of get into the details and kind of walk through that bill. That was his bill. So let him walk through the details of it.
Thank you, Hank. This was an honor to work on behalf of the brothers and sisters of the PFFUI on this bill. I encourage everyone who's listening, just go back and search this bill and watch some testimony on this. There was some pretty powerful testimony from multiple people, but really the FOP, Officer Dustin Moody. I'll talk about that in a second, but I just encourage people to go back and watch some of this testimony on House Bill 1044. So kind of just to back up, one thing that I hadn't been able to experience before last summer was the pension tour and working with the FOP side by side throughout the summer, working with legislators and kind of giving them a presentation about what the 77 fund is. But also we have time to talk about our priorities for the next upcoming legislative session. And this was a priority that actually came out of convention action last year, 2025, that kind of mandated us work on this through the legislative process. And we worked with the FOP. They have some ideas. They had provided some testimony, and we really had this honed in. Worked with the author, Representative Jim Pressel, out of the LaPorte area, a great friend of ours. We worked with him over the summer, met with him over the summer, working up to the legislative session. And we got this thing off and running. Never had a single no vote against it. Passed out of every committee, House Insurance Committee, Senate Insurance Committee. Passed out of the floor on every vote unanimously. And it really goes to show once what we can do with convention action, and we build these relationships, and we really proud to have gotten this thing over the hump. So again, it was an honor to work with you guys and work with the FOP and the author Jim Pressel on this bill, and happy to see it signed by the governor.
I would just say that also we started meeting with Representative Pressel, I would say it was July or so. We went up and saw him in LaPorte, and that's where he agreed to author this bill. And we had some bullet points, and when we put those bullet points together, that begins the process of drafting. And Representative Pressel immediately went to the Legislative Services Agency to get the draft done of the bill. And then we worked through that draft through the rest of the summer leading up into the start of the session. So it is quite a process.
Yeah. And one thing I can't remember if I mentioned it before, this is insurance not just for the member, but also the member's spouse or dependent. So it is for the whole family, not just the member.
If they qualify.
For that under their plan.
Yep.
Okay, so the next bill, Senate Bill 69, the 1977 fund benefits, authored by Senator Rogers. There's been a lot of discussion, and this bill evolved throughout the session. As the introduced bill stated, what it would have done would have increased the 20-year benefit to 53%. It would have increased the accrual benefit from 1% to 1.25% every 6 months. Those two things combined would have increased the max benefit at 32 years up to 83%. It also increased the member contribution, currently at 6%, up to 8.65%. And there was an increase to the funeral benefit to $15,000, indexed by CPI. And it also allowed members that are already in the drop to extend their drop up to that 60-month max. That was the bill as introduced. As we know, it's evolved throughout the session.
It's important to note right up front that this bill did not advance. So, and we're going to follow that up with what actually came out of that bill. But I think that it's worth noting that because there was so much conversation about this, that we take a little time just to discuss this. So this priority of the PFFUIs was developed 20 years ago out of a PFFUI convention resolution in 2005 that essentially passed overwhelmingly to say that it would be a priority of the PFFUI to enhance the pension benefit. And over the last 20 years, that resolution has been worked on. And we've seen some incremental increases into the benefit that 77 members are able to receive based on their time worked and their time in the pension system. And one of the things that there were components of that original 2005 resolution that put us on this path that said that the membership would be open to an increase in the contribution up to 2.5%. And again, this is going back 20 years ago. And the goal was to see that the maximum benefit would be 80 to 85%. So if you listen to what Hank just said, we were able to get both of those pieces reflected in the bill that really mirrored what the discussion was 20 years ago and what we've been working on over the course of this. Now, I know that we had a lot of discussion in the 2025 convention. We had precededly had some conversation in the 2024 convention that we were working on establishing this. We had a very similar bill that was filed in the 2025 session with, there were some things that occurred in that session on local revenues, but also the state budget. So that bill didn't advance. Leading up to Senate Bill 69 and working with the author and alongside of our partners with the FOP, we worked through the summer to help craft some of the points, right? So it was very similar to a previous bill. We did talk very extensively to our local leadership around the state in our fall district board meetings because we were anticipating this bill move. Anything that has anything to do with pensions also has to be reviewed and vetted in the summer study committee, which is called Pension Management Oversight Committee. So we have to really be ahead of the session when we're working on anything that's going to impact the pension. So we had the base points of what Senate Bill 69 was going to be done and accomplished and discussed, and we testified in front of PMOC over two of their meetings starting in the late summer, early fall. So we were able to really line this up. We had some discussions as well throughout the summer on anticipating where this bill might go. We knew that it would be originating in the Senate Committee on Pensions and Labor, but the House Committee, if we got it out of the Senate, we knew that it would likely go to labor and pensions in the House, and really worked with that committee chair to explain the entirety of what we were trying to achieve with this bill. So with that, that kind of gives a little bit of history that we've been working on this for organizationally for more than 20 years now. And we were very confident that it really met the intent of that original resolution, but we got a lot of feedback as this, and I think it's important as this bill was filed and was heard, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about not anticipating that we were going to have an early start to the session where this bill was heard in December. We always anticipate that, legislation is going to start after the session begins, but an early start meant that they were starting with the full session a little bit earlier. So that was a one-off in terms of what we could anticipate. But then through the process, we got a lot of feedback from members and some locals, and Hank's going to a little bit of talk about the evolution of this bill. But again, I think it's important to mention that this bill did not pass. It did not advance, but we're able to do some things that will kind of wrap up at the end of this conversation about what actually we were able to move forward in legislation. So, Hank, if you want to just talk about the path this bill took, and it was a zigzag.
It was definitely a zigzag. So as Tony said, this bill did not advance. It was introduced. I believe it was like on a Tuesday. It was scheduled for a hearing that was going to be on Thursday. So there wasn't a whole lot of time from the time that the original, the Senate Committee on Pensions and Labors, from the time that the bill dropped to the time it was scheduled for a hearing was less than 48 hours. So as I mentioned, I already talked about how the bill was introduced. In the Senate Committee on Pensions and Labors, it was amended to push the start date from July to January to allow some more time for employers to plan for that increase along with the members' increase. And then there was some, I don't know what the right word is, but some timing as far as when that increased contribution could be negotiated with the employer. So passed out of the Committee on Pensions and Labor with those amendments. Then it was recommitted to the Committee on Appropriations. In that time is where we started getting feedback from members and locals.
And there were some objections.
Yeah, there
were some objections about not so much the benefit increase as much as the
Yeah,
contribution.
there were some concerns with the contribution increase.
And if I may say, I think this is a good point to mention that we always understood that in order to enhance the benefit, there would need to be a pay for. And understanding that our employers already contribute just as we do, but at a different level, and the employers' contributions move from year to year. The members' contribution stays at it stays unless acted upon in the legislature at 6%. That was originally in the 1977 fund when it was established. But we always knew that if we wanted to seek an increased benefit, that there would have to be a pay for. And part of this is understanding that some of that pay for would come from the investment in an additional contribution for an increased benefit. So I think that's worth saying.
So, again, bill was introduced, passed out of pensions and labor as amended with those two amendments of pushing the start date back. Then I went to Senate Committee on Appropriations. After hearing the feedback, we met with the FOP and worked with the FOP, and it was decided to pull out the pension benefit and the member contribution from this bill. So in the Senate Committee on Appropriations, the bill was amended to delete all that language out of the bill. It did still leave in the funeral benefit to $15,000 indexed to CPI, and it also still included the extension of the drop language. When it came out of that committee, we did receive a lot of questions and concerns that the contribution increase was still listed at that time in that bill.
And this would be people that are looking up on IGA, the Indiana General Assembly website that posts these bills.
So when you look up on IGA, the Indiana General Assembly website, they track all the committee amendments and any path of that bill. So the first page is actually the bill language, which showed that the contribution increase was not included in that. The next page would have been the latest action, or the first amendment. So that would have been the amendment out of the Senate of Committee on Pensions and Labors. At that time, the contribution and the member contribution and benefit increase was still in the bill. The next committee report is the Senate Committee on Appropriations, where it says it starts deleting lines and pages. So when you look at it, if you read the whole document, if you just stop at the Senate Committee on Pensions and Labor, it does look like the contribution increase is in there, which it is. But that's just showing the committee report on what action was taken in that committee. So if you follow down to the Senate Committee on Appropriations language, it shows that it's deleted out.
Yeah, and it's a very fluid process. And I think that that explanation is relevant because people were seeing that, but it's our job to track that. And we've got the understanding of what those committee actions look like. One, because we're there, but two, we have a familiarity with, how these things are reported. So we got some questions, which is great, that people are paying attention. But that was something that we were also very well aware of and understood that, this is the life of a bill that's, posted. So we were very aware that committee information was still posted, but we were confident and understood that contribution, by stripping out the enhancement, also stripped out the contribution increase, even though it was still in print, just to illustrate the life of that bill as it went through the process.
So after it, it did pass out of the Senate Committee on Appropriations with the funeral benefit of $15,000 indexed to CPI and the drop extension. Those were the two components that passed out of the Senate Committee on Appropriations. Then went to the Senate floor where it passed. Then at the turn, all Senate bills go over to the House. So it went over to the House. It was referred to the House Committee on Employment and Labor and Pensions, which it did pass out of that committee with no amendments. So at this time, it's still just the $15,000 funeral benefit index at CPI and the drop extension. After that, it was referred to the House Committee on Ways and Means. It didn't receive a hearing in the Committee on Ways and Means. Bill ultimately didn't advance and died. And we'll get into the next bill, but we were able to get the funeral benefit increased to $15,000. We were able to get that added to Senate Bill 14, which is actually our next bill we'll go over. So we were able to get that language added to that bill in conference committee.
And I think it's important to mention too, Hank went through the life of this bill as from beginning to end. But when we made the decision to approach the author about removing the benefit enhancement, the actual pension benefit enhancement, along with removing contribution increase, this was not a decision that was taken lightly. We've spent, the three of us, hours, if not days, sort of contemplating what the best strategy would be. And then we were, rightly so, engaging the other affected stakeholder, the members of the FOP. And we had a lot of strategy discussions about how we wanted to approach this, and ultimately decided to approach the author because there was, members reaching out to individual lawmakers expressing opposition to this language and the increase, both in the benefit and the contribution, because those things had to go together. And then, we encountered legislators who were asking us about, where, what the feel of this was, and this is in real time as the session's going on. So after a full evaluation and it was done somewhat reluctantly, but we came to the conclusion that with the amount of pushback and concern from members, even though we had a lot of support from members as well, we felt like the best thing to do is to remove what we coined the offensive language, and sort of reset and see if we could get the other pieces of the bill, like the burial benefit increase and the drop extension increase, done. So this wasn't done without a lot of thought. And where we are today with this is, going forward, we're going to have a robust conversation at our upcoming convention at the end of May, just like we did 20 years ago, to say, what is the direction in terms of what the delegates, each local sends their delegates. What is each local thinking? And can we consolidate on a mission going forward? So I would say, it's appropriate to mention that I don't see that this particular concept of a bill being filed in the next session until we have an opportunity really to talk about what is our priority and going forward, because anything that's successful, I think it starts with having support from all of those people involved. So we're going to have a robust conversation about it going forward before we determine what happens next in terms of the 77 fund benefit enhancement and what that looks like. So we're going to have a lot of conversation to regroup on this particular issue. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. All right. So as I mentioned, following up with Senate Bill 69, our next bill is Senate Bill 14. This is Pension Matters, also authored by Senator Rogers. This is basically the NPERS agency bill that was, as Tony mentioned, about Pension Management Oversight Committee. This was also heard at Pension Management Oversight Committee over the summer. And again, this is basically the NPERS agency bill. It goes over any fund that's under the NPERS umbrella, so teachers, civilian perf, us, judges, anything that's in that fund. So the part that pertains to us is there needed to be some technical corrections to in line with IRS regulations specific to the airport members that are currently working to become members of the fund. It was not in line with IRS, so they did some cleanup just to make that in. And then this,
which we supported, and really, yeah, and that was offered in the previous session, but did not advance. So it came back this year, and we're glad to see that it was in there.
Yeah. And then, as I mentioned towards the end of Senate Bill 69, and when this bill moved through its process, it got to what's conference committees. The author can either accept changes or not. Basically, it goes to a conference committee where they can make additional changes. So in the conference committee, originally, the language to add the burial benefit increased to $15,000 indexed to CPI, and the drop extension was put in at that committee hearing. They then have to take that language, get approved by their caucuses. Unfortunately, that was unable to happen. But what we were able to finally land on, and that was approved, in the conference committee report and ultimately was passed as part of Senate Bill 14 was increasing that burial benefit from $12,000 to $15,000. So while we didn't get the CPI index or the drop extension, we were able to get that burial benefit increase in Senate Bill 14.
And let me just explain what the CPI indexing is. So for those that aren't familiar, the Consumer Price Index fluctuates based on the cost of living, essentially. And what we were really looking forward to is that the funeral benefit, burial benefit, whatever you want to call it, would be adjusted to that had the original language gone through to the CPI. So it's in essence getting a COLA on that particular benefit because it took 19 years to see from the most recent increase. But that didn't come through. There was a little bit of negotiation. And as Hank mentioned, the conference committee, this process on this specific item was literally two days before the session ended. And quite frankly, we were able to get agreement and see the funeral benefit increase by $3,000 the last day of session, the morning of the last day of session. So that went in the conference committee, and I think that we're happy that happened. That does provide an increased benefit.
Absolutely, and it was signed by the governor earlier this month on March 5th. So our next bill is Senate Bill 180, various healthcare matters. This was authored by Senator Brown. It was signed by the governor again on March 5th. This was as the bill started, it was a very large bill with multiple components. It got pared down throughout the process, but one part of it was our line of duty injury or hurt on duty language that we got in. So what this does is it provides that a current or former police or officer or firefighter may recover medical benefits from first responders' employer for an employment-related injury or illness without first proceeding through a workers' compensation claim, and if that claim was withdrawn or denied for any reason, it does not preclude that member from recovering medical benefits from the employer. So I know we talked about this for quite extensively several times about currently we were kind of in both statutes, the workers' comp and our hurt on duty statute. This cleans it up and basically says that if your employer has workers' comp denies it. Under that first denial, you can then go back to your employer and have that injury covered. Another thing that it did is as we were working through this is where we engaged our legal and had our legal review all the codes in Indiana. We discovered that not all fire departments had the same language in it. So this made all language consistent to make sure that every member of every fire department is treated the same. So again, this passed, no opposition. It was ultimately signed by the governor.
And I'll just say also convention action came by a resolution from the convention floor. And since you mentioned engaging our legal, I just got to give my brother from Local 1262 a shout out, legal intern. He's finishing up law school. Rob Williams from Local 1262. He was able to be assigned from General Counsel Carlson to help with some of that research, and he looked up quite a bit on 180 and as well House Bill 1044 as well.
Good job, Rob. I give him an A.
A+.
Next bill is Senate Bill 208, firefighter cancer insurance. This was authored by Senator Kreider. This did receive a committee hearing, but no committee vote, which I think was by design. We kind of have a plan for this one or a strategy for this one. And Tony, would you like to?
Yeah. So, it's no secret that we have a problem in the fire service, and that is we have more occupational cancers or occupational related cancers coming up. And we're trying to address this problem in a variety of ways. What this bill, specific to this bill, and this bill is going to come back in the next session. The nice thing is that we have a framework that Senator Kreider authored. The bill was heard in committee and testimony was received, and we got a lot of support for this particular bill. And as Hank mentioned, we did not anticipate that it would see a vote this session, primarily because the components of the bill, we likely will seek an appropriation from the state budget to help offset the cost to local municipalities and to what the meat of the bill is. And this was not a budget year, but it is served us well in terms of being getting the issue out, having a discussion about it publicly. And the bill itself, as written, even though it didn't get a vote, it took on more co-sponsors.
I think everybody in the committee said
Everybody in the committee. So what this bill, Senate Bill 208, and it will likely not get the same number next session, but it does essentially three things. The motivation here is, one, to have a regular review and recommendations produced on risk reduction, where our members what they can do to see a risk reduction. That not all risks can be mitigated in our world, but we are trying on the national level, and the IFF is very much engaged in trying to get PFAS out of the structural firefighter gear. That's a huge component, but we're also looking at regular updates on what we can do, like showering within the hour after fighting a structure fire, reducing the occurrences when a higher level of protection is not needed, stay out of the bunker gear, and doing a variety of things from a health perspective to reduce risk of cancer. The other piece, number two, is requiring early detection. And early detection of cancer has seen to be successful in ultrasound scans and certain types of blood tests that test for the presence of cancer through byproducts that cancer cells produce. We want to see that every firefighter in the state of Indiana is able to get this early screening on a regular basis. So that would be a requirement in the bill that be provided. In addition to what we already do with annual wellness and health screenings and physicals, all of these things go together. The third piece of the bill would be to require the employer to provide coverage for out-of-pocket health care costs for an occupational cancer for the treatment and diagnosis, and then the subsequent monitoring. What we hope is that a member doesn't die in the line of duty because of an occupational cancer. We hope is that they find it early, treat it well into remission or cure. But there is an ongoing requirement to that, the people that survive cancer. That could be ongoing medications for a duration of years, definitely a regular scan of some sort to see if there's a recurrence of the cancer or another type of cancer. And then perhaps even infusions, in medication. So we want to see if this is truly an occupational illness, so we want to make sure that it's treated like an occupational illness. And oftentimes, the initial coverage is covered, but then there's ongoing costs. And what we know is that workers' compensation is not covering cancers. And we've had some discussions with the workers' comp companies about why that is, and we have a better understanding. So we feel like this bill will be the genesis of the proper care of our members when they are diagnosed with occupational cancer. So we look forward to working with Senator Kreider, who in fact is a recent cancer survivor himself. And he also comes from the law enforcement community prior to him being a senator. So he has a very, I would say, very self-aware understanding of the impact of cancer and what we need to do to go forward to at least try to address this in these ways. So we look forward to that bill coming back in the 2027 session.
All right, so that wraps up our priority bills. Some other bills we're tracking: House Bill 1001, Housing Matters, authored by Representative Miller. This was signed by the governor March 4th. This is an all-encompassing housing bill. Goes over all kinds of stuff. Couple points of interest for us. It was amended in committee to add that municipality or political subdivision may not require what's called repeaters. We knew it was amended. We're going to continue to work on that.
And we know this is an issue. It doesn't necessarily prevent repeaters from being installed in large spaces or those type of buildings that you can't, where our radios are having a hard time working. It's something that we're going to keep working on, but it does not prohibit these from being installed. It's just a matter of who pays for it, and 1001 address that, at least in this current form.
Yeah. One other point on this bill is originally introduced. It did have what we call the single staircase provision that we've been hearing across the country. It did have a provision in there that allowed for single single staircase for buildings 5 or 6 floors. It also had a limitation on how large an elevator could be, that it could only accommodate a wheelchair for those two. That was in the introduced bill. We worked with our partners and worked through that to get that amended out. So as the final bill came out, that language was no longer in there. Next bill is House Bill 1003, Boards and Commissions. This was another large bill that was where they were trying to make more boards. There's a whole lot of boards and commissions. They were trying to make them more efficient, which ones aren't working, which ones are working. The part that applies to us is it repeals the Fire Prevention Building Safety Commission and transfers that responsibility over to IDHS once a building code is adopted. So currently, I can't remember when the last building code was adopted.
It's very outdated.
Yeah.
It's safe to say that it's very outdated.
So what it does is just once that building code is adopted, then all those responsibilities currently under the commission will go to IDHS, and then building codes would be done legislatively
in the future. And, that we'll be able to track those just like any other bill. So any amendment to the existing fire prevention building code would be done legislatively, and we would be able to monitor those and track those and testify on those bills as they go through the course. So the other thing I would mention originally in this bill was a combining of the EMS commission and the fire, we'll call it the fire board, but the Board of Firefighter Personnel Standards and Education, combining those two, the commission and the board. That was ultimately taken out, but it did generate a really in-depth discussion, both with the author, but also other stakeholders. And ultimately, the author decided to remove that provision. So those two, the commission, EMS commission, and the fire board remain as is going forward. So that was removed from that bill. But that was a very extensive bill, and when we talk about these are 300-400 page bills that Hank didn't mention this earlier, but we review all of these bills as they're filed to determine, what we need to track and what we need to, testify for or against or work on in the legislative arenas.
and including the amendments.
And
There were some very long amendments.
Right. And amendments come during the course, either, in the chamber of origin or in the opposite chamber, or in fact, when they potentially can go to conference committee as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces that we need to, and we do keep very close tabs on.
So another extensive bill is House Bill 1210. This is Department of Local Government Finance, authored by Representative Snow. It is law signed by the governor on March 12th. This bill is another one of those over 400-page bills that had some amendments that were over 100 pages that we would get at 9 o'clock in the morning during committee. I think we're going to go more in depth into this and put something out as a in-depth detail. But this is basically a continuation of Senate Enrolled Act 1 and some of the revenue streams enacted by there. So this is going to be an ongoing process. Just a couple highlights from what this one does is it did push the new local income tax back to 2029 versus currently was supposed to set in 2028. It gave another year for the legislators to kind of work through some of this. It did address, there was an issue with some debt and having enough tax to cover the debt, so it addressed that issue. It allowed some more flexibility with the fire and EMS rate. Senate Enrolled Act 1 originally had a formula that was pretty strict on how that distribution would do for those income tax. It lifted that and just said they must consider service boundaries and population in that. And it did require townships, as long as 50% of the runs were made by a township fire department by full-time firefighters with at least a $30,000 salary, that they shall receive some of that local income tax funding. It also put a cap on fire protection districts at that 40 cents, much like Senate Enrolled Act did with the territories.
And as Hank said, there's a lot of material in this, and this is just the next generation of addressing some of these revenue controls that were put in place in 2025. We had numerous conversations with not only the author, but leadership, and this is still a work in progress. And exactly as Hank mentioned, we are in the works now of producing like a one-page bulleted change that affects fire and EMS that we'll put out to our local leaders across the state pretty soon.
Another bill was Senate Bill 270, township mergers. There is a like bill in the House Bill 1315, that also addressed township modernization. That was a focus this session that we heard. They did different things. Ultimately, House Bill 1315 did not advance, but some of those provisions were put into Senate Bill 270. So this was authored by Senator Niemeyer. It was signed by the governor on March 5th. And this is, there's going to be more to come on this. It's basically a point system, and it looks at every township and whether a township is meeting expectations, should they merge with another township, or should they be reorganized under a municipality. Part of that point system does include a fire department or operating a fire department. But there's going to be more to come on this.
And I think that it has to, this needs to settle a little bit and actually see how the process is going to work. But I think that we were very pointed in the things that we had concerns about, and, shared that through dialogue with other stakeholder groups, but also with the bill authors, and to ensure that the fire service and EMS were being considered during this process. And I think largely that it was. But this, like many bills, this bill was not without controversy. So we're going to be on the lookout for additional changes probably going forward in this bill in the next session or so.
All right, so I'm going to go through a list of bills that did not advance. These, there is a link found in our show notes and social media posts, as well as our website, for these bills and all bills that we discussed on this podcast. Emergency medical service education, another digital learning technology pilot program. There is a bill for line of duty disability from PFAS exposure. I do want to mention that was authored by Representative Novak, who's a former local president and former fire chief, so one of our own in the State House.
And a freshman lawmaker.
There was he also authored a bill for tax increment financing, emergency medical service bill, county fire protection, payment for claims for emergency service, property and local income tax, and that is it.
Nice job, Hank. We appreciate it.
On April 27th and 28th, the PFFUI will be hosting its second Communications Training Academy in Indianapolis. This 1.5-day skills-focused course aims to improve the capabilities of a local officer or member responsible for communications, public relations, and social media within the local. We look forward to seeing the members who have signed up for this event at the end of April. On May 27 through 29, the PFFUI will be hosting its 50th convention in Indianapolis. Please remember that the cutoff date to make your hotel reservations, return your credentials, and submit resolutions is April 24, 2026. We hope to see you there. Cody, I will hand things over to you.
Thank you, brother. Just want to give a special thanks to the 22 brothers from the PFFUI that attended the IFF LegCon earlier this month. It went very well. We discussed some IAFF legislative priorities with all but one of our congressional delegation, and that was just a scheduling mishap with some traveling issues out there the member of Congress couldn't get back for. But it went very well. We had a scholarship recipient from Terre Haute, Brother Jay Umball, who attended as well. Everything went very well, so thank you to those members who attended, and we'll prep for next year as well. Lastly, I'll just wrap up by saying it's primary season. Primary is coming up on May 5th. You most likely will be hearing from us and our endorsed candidates and our communication out there to all the locals. So please, if you are planning on voting in this upcoming primary, consider the Indiana Professional Firefighters PAC endorsed candidates. We've got a lot of really, really good friends who are being primaried in this upcoming primary. We've talked about several of them today in this legislative report, so please consider the PAC endorsed candidate when you're going to vote on May 5th.
Thanks, guys. And in the meantime, how are we spending our time? The fundraising circuit is on. So we're meeting with legislators, senators, and state representatives as we meet with them at their fundraising events. And we look forward to seeing everybody at our upcoming PFFUI events. And as always, give us a call if you need something.
Thank you for listening to the PFFUI podcast. Follow us on social media by searching the Professional Firefighters Union of Indiana. For more information about news and upcoming events, visit www.pffui.com. Until next time, this is PFFUI Communications Director Eric Shoaib. Stay safe.